and I could hear in the distance screaming, shouting, explosions, and chaos. A time of great sadness for our country, a time of great sorrow. It is sometimes easy to feel incredibly helpless when you see things on the news. I had a nice long, after I got back from dinner and got into my hotel room, I had a nice long conversation with my parents as well. And we talked about the state of affairs and the things that have happened. And my mother tells me that she is so glued to the news now, but has to force herself to stop. Not to bury her head in the sand, but because the anxiety and the fear and the horribleness that happens is grating on her so much. And I'm certain she is not alone in feeling this way. And I'm certain many of you are feeling this as well. When I think about the state of things, the answer to all these questions, right? The answer to how do we unite with everybody? How do we fix these problems of society? How do we heal this, the divide and the harm in this country? Right? How do we do this? And sometimes I think we get caught up in gigantic, grand gestures. And of course, going to protests and expressing your freedom of opinion and your freedom of speech is definitely something that should not be discouraged. But sometimes I think it's not in the huge demonstrations, the huge emotional, toils that happen that causes change. It definitely plays a factor into it. But I also want the members of Oregon Buddhist Temple to, not to be harmed, not to be hurt. Even sometimes, and even when we can see, sometimes that's beyond our control. But at the same time, I sometimes think it can be how we treat a person on a daily basis, how we can treat a stranger sometimes. Not making assumptions about a person when they first appear before you. Now, sometimes there are people who wear certain clothes or who wear certain things and they want to show you who they are and really force that into your face. And sadly, of course, one of our visceral reactions to that is fear. And that's understandable. But I also ask for and I know how hard this is, but a sense of compassion too. Because we have to think about it. What life has this person led? What life has this person been, was this person born in that caused them to feel this way? To look at other people that way? To think that harming others because of difference in skin or physical differences that we have no control over is acceptable behavior, right? And when we think about the karma of this person as well, right? Karma, remember as I said before in previous Dharma talks, karma's not there to punish people. It's there to reveal truth. Karma is there to reveal the source of our sadness and our sorrow. The opening quotation that I shared with you this morning comes from the Nirvana Sutra, or comes from Shinran Shonin's writing on the Nirvana Sutra. We all know that the three Pure Land Sutras are the basis of our teachings. Oh, sorry, the Bikkyōtai, the scrolls, so it's not on the thing, but the three Pure Land Sutras are the basis of our teachings. But what's interesting is Shinran Shonin also wrote heavily on another sutra, the Nirvana Sutra. And the Nirvana Sutra is actually a sequel to the Contemplation Sutra. So to give you a very brief review on what the Contemplation Sutra is, it starts off with a drama in India, where the evil prince, Ajatasattu, usurps the throne from his father, King Bimbisara, and locks him in the dungeon. And he finds that his mother is sneaking him food, and so he imprisons her so she can't do that anymore. Now, unfortunately, King Bimbisara passes away, and Ajatasattu takes the throne and becomes the new king. And with that kind of action, you can probably imagine the type of king that he was. And this is where the Nirvana Sutra starts up. The Nirvana Sutra starts up with King Ajatasattu, as a tyrannical dictator. But guess what? Later on in his age, he starts to become sick, and his body's become covered in sores. Doctors try to heal him with different medicinal herbs and medicines, but nothing is working. All these advisors who he calls upon to tell him, what's wrong with me? And the real truth of the matter is that King Ajatasattu is starting to feel guilt and shame for the horribleness and the horrible deeds and actions that he's done. These are what the sores and the covering of of his body is starting to emulate. Now, the problem with all these advisors is that they're kind of enablers. They tell him, well, yeah, you did some bad things, but you know what? You're not different than any other king out there. There's been so many stories about other kings and other people who have done horrible things to their fathers or done all these. So you're not that bad. So he keeps getting these yes men telling him, yeah, you did some bad things, but it's not all that bad in the long run. And guess what? Ajatasattu does not get better. So finally, his final advisor, Jivika, tells him, I think the only path forward is for you to go and talk to the Buddha. I think the only thing that you can do to help this is to go to the Buddha. And this actually terrifies Ajatasattu, because he knows who the Buddha is. And he said, the Buddha is this great sage and great awakener of, the great enlightened one. If I go before the Buddha, how's that going, he's going to judge me, he's going to be totally harsh with me. But then when Ajatasattu approaches the Buddha greets him like any other person and realizes, you are sick and you are in need of help. Here's the answer to this. And then Buddha teaches him a lesson about impermanence and interdependence itself, helping him to realize that his evil actions are also were caused from karma before he was born too. His father and his mother actually didn't do some very nice things either. I won't go full into the detail of the story, but the thing that the Buddha teaches Ajatasattu is that, that this horrible cause of what you've become comes from countless kalpas and countless eons of karma that has brought you to where you are now. And the fact that he actually realized his wrong ways and went to the Buddha for help is kind of the first step in his healing process and in his journey to redemption. So the hardest thing that we can do sometimes is admit when we're wrong and admit when we've made a mistake. Even when the mistake is staring us right in the face. Even when we look at the way things are now and realize that things are even probably worse sometimes than they were before. Some people with pride cannot admit that their way of doing things is not working. Or some people cannot admit that maybe I made a mistake. And in fact, actually, even being confronted with the mistake, they dig their heels in further and listen to people like the advisors to tell them, oh yeah, it's not so bad. It's not so horrible. But this is what Buddhism forces us to do. We like I said in the story, right? Ajatasattu is terrified to go see the Buddha. And why is this? Because not only is the Buddha a great teacher and a great spiritual leader, but he also represents ultimate reality, ultimate truth. And who among us really wants to take a look at that? Who among us can really face what is truly there? The Buddha offers us a very deep look at ourselves. But at the same time, with the teachings of Shinran Shonin and coming back to the universal vow of Amida Buddha, we have to be honest about ourselves. We have to be honest about what our limitations are, where we fall short. And this is even a person as evil, and I put that in quotation marks, as Ajatasattu in this story, was forced to realize that because of his health condition that was going on with him. All of the evil that he had done, all of the horrible actions started to manifest themselves in this sickness. And he did not want to look at it. And yet he was forced to look at it eventually, because his only hope for survival was to go before the Buddha and take a good, honest look at himself. So all of us can take a lesson from this story that Shinran Shonin talks about. But why does Shinran Shonin bring this up in the first place? This section of the Kyogyo Shinshu, of the writing that Shinran Shonin did, is actually titled "The Person Difficult to Save." Right? The person difficult to save. I almost want to say the person impossible to save. There are probably so many people that we can look at on the television right now and think to ourselves, this person is so beyond redemption. This person is so beyond helping. Right? We think these things so much. But at the same time, we think about humanity in itself. We think about us as human beings and the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha teaches us that even the person who seems so far gone is actually able to be saved. Is able to be saved from the rebirth and the constant rebirth and death of samsara. Now for us as Jodo Shinshu followers, that's Namo Amida Butsu. And let me just put down like a thing here now, right? Saying Namo Amida Butsu alone is not going to fix the problems of society. Right? Saying Namo Amida Butsu alone is not this magic pill that will make everything all better and make things wondrous and happy again. Right? That's not what's going on here. And maybe sometimes that might be hard for some people to hear. Some people, they want an easy answer. They want to go into a religious institution and get that magic potion, that magic pill, that magic spell that's going to heal everything and make things all better. But that's not how the Dharma works. The Dharma works to show us a mirror in front of our faces, to show us our own imperfections. Not physical, right? Not physical, not on the outside imperfections, but the imperfections and the sicknesses of our mind, that is kleshas, that are hindrances. And then when we see that, it can be very ugly sometimes. Right? We all want to believe that we're on the side of righteousness and good and just. And sometimes we are. Sometimes we are on the right side of history. Right? That's not necessarily up for debate. But at the same time, here's a prediction I will say to here and now. If we fight violence with violence, and if you think the way to make the situation better is to overthrow and topple the government and burn everything to the ground, right? You will create an exact copy of the society that you detested in the first place. You will just be at the top. But guess what happens when you're at the top? It's a long fall to the bottom. So, Shinran Shonin encourages all of us to remember, right, about the truth and the reality that stands before us here and now. Once again, this isn't to say that we should all become pacifists and just let things go by, right? Be lazy, because the Nembutsuge takes care of everything. Absolutely not. If you feel the need that you need to go out and carry a sign and march and protest what's happening right now, I highly encourage you to do so. I highly encourage you, but I also highly encourage you to try your best to protect yourselves and be safe, right? At the same time, realizing too, this is the hardest part for us as Buddhists, that the people you are opposing, the people who, you think are so beyond help, are suffering humans too. Not to say that we excuse what they do, right? No, there's never an excuse. And there should be consequences for horrible actions done, right? But the moment we start thinking of our opposition as non-humans, or as like devils or horrible beings, right? We fall ourselves into that poison of the person who is difficult to save. I had a whole other Dharma talk in mind when I, before I came, before the events of yesterday happened. And, before I heard the chaos and the active ensuing violence that was going on not too far away from me, less than a mile from me, actually, where my hotel was. And it occurred to me, right, as a priest, I have to teach you doctrine. I have to teach you teachings. But I also can't bury my head in the sand. And I also can't, create a space of ignorance either. A space of, where, we can all come in here and feel good about ourselves, right? I don't want you to feel horrible about yourselves or, tear yourselves apart. But I also realize that there is a large elephant in the room. There is a large presence that's happening here. And I have to speak on that. For it would be very irresponsible of me not to, even on a day like Hoonko. But I think at the end of the day, Shinran Shonin's story of preaching the Nembutsuge to anyone and everyone, constantly reminding people again and again that they are cared for and loved by the working of the Dharma, can actually create a positive influence. Yes, righteous anger sometimes is necessary and in response to a horrible action. But I sometimes think that if we oppose a person with a deep sense of wisdom and compassion that is imparted from Amida Buddha, that could actually change them as well. I will say this here and now. I don't think any person is beyond saving. I think all people are capable of doing wonderful, compassionate things and horrible, reprehensible things. And as horrible and reprehensible as the things that they have done may be, there still is a road to redemption for them. And yes, if a horrible thing is done, they should serve time in prison. I don't think prison is the solution to making a society a better place. But I also think, right, that there are such things as consequences, as to horrible acts of violence. But at the same time, if all our minds are on punishment and getting back and revenge and retribution, then we're not fixing the problem. We're only tearing things down. And with this in mind, I highly encourage all of us to reflect on the teachings of Shinran Shonin, for I think that they can guide us in our daily life. Right? It shouldn't be our mission necessarily to try and force everyone to think the way that we do. But if we can respond with a deep sense of compassion and kindness, even to those who may harm us sometimes, and it depends on the level of harm, I understand. But even to those who may cause us harm, maybe, just maybe, and hopefully, they too will see that there are other ways of resolving differences and problems than with guns and sticks and violence. Right? Can we not end this suffering ourselves? Can we not end this bleeding? I think it's definitely within our power to do so. And definitely with the guiding light of Amida Buddha's wisdom and compassion, can we make that a reality? Some of you are young here in this Sangha. You may have these very strong, festering emotions. You may want to get out there in March. I don't want to dissuade that. I don't want to quench that, or I don't want to quash that. Some of you are afraid, and some of you are so scared because there might be a couple of you here who lived in a time of great upheaval when my ancestors, Japanese Americans, were forcibly removed from their homes as well and taken, to these camps out in the middle of the desert without any due process. I don't want to neglect your fears and say that your fears aren't valid. And some of you may, and I certainly hope this is not the case, Some of you, and some of you may actually support what's happening. And I can only hope that eventually that feeling changes into a feeling of compassion, into a feeling of understanding, into a feeling of, this is, the religion of Buddhism is here to alleviate suffering, not cause more of it. The Nembutsuge can bring so much relief to us, but it should also not be used as a golden ticket to be lazy and selfish and apathetic. So I highly encourage all of us to think deeply on the teachings of Shinran. For those of you who want to gather and march and go full ahead on speed, do so, but do so with wisdom and compassion in mind, I beg of you. Because anger can easily turn to something ugly. Anger can easily turn into something that you cannot take back. For those of you who are scared, please lean upon people who you are close with and who you can trust and help you sit through this time of great anxiety and fear. And for those of you who may even agree with what's happening or who may even support these actions, I ask you, once again, to deeply consider, what does compassion mean? What does wisdom mean? Does causing violence really, really fix problems? I will end my Dharma talk with these words. You can all see that I'm wearing a uniform of some kind, right? And it can be very easy for me to get arrogant and full of myself. Look at how fancy my robes are. Look at all the work that I did to earn this spot. Look at all the work that I did to earn this space. But if there's one thing that my teachers taught me when I talk about wearing a uniform, is feel the weight of this uniform. That's not a weight of privilege. That's a weight of responsibility. That's a weight of teaching wisdom and compassion, teaching Shinran Shoni's message and Shakyamuni Buddha's message. And anytime I may start thinking I'm feeling full of myself and like, look at me, look how special I am, I have to remember that is my foolish self talking. That is my foolish, bombu, unenlightened self. Which is more the reason why I must rely upon Amida Buddha to once again remind me again and again and again of my humility. Please join me in Gassho and speak the Nembutsuge with me. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo